Okay, so good morning, everybody, again. It's the, did I say the 12th of October as I check my calendar? And this last week, there were some very interesting questions that came through on the WhatsApp group. The first one was about, well, I don't know what order they came in, but there was a question about blood pressure and what Neolife products we can use for that. And then a question about vitamin D, and specifically a vitamin D called D1, and what that is, and what does Neolife provide in these areas. So without much more ado, I'm going to hand over to our erudite, incredible pharmacist slash Iron Man on your shirt, Bobby, and health guru. Give me the word for what you're doing, Bob. You are
Health
doing
and wellness coach. That's
health and
the
wealth, a health coach. All right. So without much more ado, over to you, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Am I able to share, Rob? Okay. Sharing, just sending a request. Great. Can you see my screen? Can you guys see the screen all right? You can? Good stuff. All right. Let's get the slideshow going. Okay, so as Monica said, this topic of vitamin D and the high blood pressure came up, and there is a connection between the two. But I think with the vitamin D as well, the interesting thing about vitamin D is that over the last few years, it's been a pretty contentious subject, and also lots of new research coming out and lots of conflicting information. So, it's actually, I think, opportune that we do go through and have a look at this at the moment. So what is vitamin D? It's basically what is in fact called a fat soluble corticosteroid hormone. We know it as vitamin D, and it's something that has for many years just been associated with bone function, and rather bone density and osteoporosis and so on. But it's essential for many other physiological functions in the human body as well. And, it's something that our body can actually synthesize just through sun exposure. And that's why generally it's not particularly a vitamin. It's more, in fact, acts like a hormone. But because, we've come to know it in common parlance, it's called vitamin and vitamin D. From the ultraviolet B rays in the sun. And, we can generally get enough of that from the sun if we get the exposure and we're in the right parts of the world. And, we do actually get out and do that. Due to the way that vitamin D actually works, it bridges this gap between a nutrient and a hormone. And it's responsible for many vital roles in our body, aside from the traditional one that most of us know of, just bone health. There are lots and lots of other things that it does. So the types of vitamin D, and I'll mention quickly as well that, the question that Monica brought up, but I'll speak a bit about it at the end of the presentation as well. There are two main forms of vitamin D, and one vegetarian and one animal. Now the vegetarian or the vegan one, this D2, it comes from various plant sources and also fungi that's been exposed to sun. So, that's this ergocalciferol, which is, there's some of that in our vegan D as well as the D3. It has D3 and D2. It's commonly found also in a lot of the fortified foods and dietary supplements, and it's actually less potent than D3 and has a slightly shorter duration of action than D3. And then D3, which is what more commonly people will know and will be using at the moment, is this cholecalciferol. And that's what we synthesize in our skin when we're exposed to the sunlight. And it's also found in in animal-based foods like fatty fish, liver, and egg yolks. It's more effective at raising and maintaining our vitamin D levels in the blood. And just a bit of chemistry, both forms are converted in the liver to what, the active forms of 25-hydroxyvitamin, and that then is what we find in the blood and measure in the blood. And then subsequently in the kidneys, it's converted to this 1,2,5 dihydroxyvitamin D, which is the active form of it. The other important thing about this is that, vitamin D actually regulates somewhere in the region of 1,000 genes. So the expression of many of the genes and many of the functions in our body is as a result of vitamin D. And that's one of the reasons why vitamin D is actually so important, to make sure that our levels are right. So what are the primary sources of vitamin D, and where do we get it from? And, the most natural and efficient source is obviously the sun, the UVB rays that convert this 7-dehydrocholesterol in our skin. And understand there's a type of cholesterol that's converting in our skin to the pre-vitamin D, and that's then transformed into vitamin D3, which we use in our body for these very many important functions. Factors that affect the synthesis are obviously where you are in the world. A lot of the guys up north and so on don't get quite as much sun as we do. The time of day also will differentiate, and I always say it's good to get out early in the day. I try and get up and get the sun at sunrise. And then, of course, skin pigmentation affects it, as well as age. As you get older, you produce less of your vitamin D3, and then also sunscreen use, which using that blocks the sun out, and of course that affects the synthesis of your vitamin D. We can also get it in our diets. It's naturally found in limited number of foods, things particularly the fatty foods or fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, cod liver oil, which I'm sure many of you, and I remember my mother giving it to me as a child. Very good source of it, very cheap source of it, and easily available as well. Egg yolks, beef liver. And then it's also fortified in a lot of foods. Milk, actually, they started putting it in there. It's not naturally in there. Calcium is in there. So they started putting in, and it's normally the vegan type that they put in milk if they're going to fortify it. It's orange juice. It's fortified in cereals, and many plant-based milk alternatives will be fortified with vitamin D as well, and normally the D2. Some of the supplements, and we have many supplements that are available now. I know people have started to ask me, which ones do you use? And a lot of my friends ask, well, there's so many out there, which ones do you use? We'll talk a little bit about that, and maybe questions will come there. You can also get both vitamin D2 and D3 in the supplements. And it's generally recommended for people who have limited sun exposure, dietary restrictions, which could be as a result of diseases they may be suffering from, or specific health conditions that they have. And I'll mention one or two a little bit later. So what does vitamin D really do for us at the end of the day? Bone health, which is the traditional thing that we've always known, it's necessary for the calcium and phosphorus absorption in the gut, and it promotes your bone mineralization. So it prevents, as we've known in kids, the rickets normally, and then in adults, it's normally osteomalacia or osteoporosis that it's really important for as far as bone health is concerned. And that's one of the things as well that our vegan D is really good for. And we'll talk about that at the end. The other very important thing, which has been this very, I suppose, contentious thing that's happened over the last couple of years, and recognition, in fact, that it is vital as far as our immunity is concerned. It helps modulate the innate and adaptive immune response. So, the fighting infections in our body's response to foreign things coming into the body. Very, very important to have good, decent levels of vitamin D for that. It also enhances what we call the pathogen fighting effects of the monocytes and macrophages, so relating to one of the other avenues of your immune system. And then if you go into it in detail, there's somewhere in the region of 8 different areas, basically that our immune system operates. And this is just 2 of them that we mentioned here. It may also reduce the risk of autoimmune diseases and help with improved gut health. And one of the things I've mentioned as well is I think at some stage it would be good to do a presentation relating to metabolic syndrome and this whole gut thing, because you'll be amazed at how much of an impact that has on your overall health at the end of the day. It's also important for muscle function and contributes to muscle strength and function. Deficiency in vitamin D is linked to an increased risk of falls and injury as far as fractures in the elderly are concerned. It's not just the osteoporosis, it also has a cognitive impact as well. Cell growth and differentiation, and this is where its role in the prevention of cancer, not only in the immunity side of it, but also it influences cell proliferation and apoptosis, which is an essential thing that our body does, where it kills off cells, old cells, damaged cells, to enable the renewal of good new cell growth. So it helps in prevention of and inhibiting tumor growth as well. In cardiovascular health, and this is the link to some degree with the blood pressure situation, is it helps regulate our blood pressure and reduce risk of cardiovascular diseases. It also plays a role in this RAS or renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, which is a way in which our body regulates blood pressure. So it's important to have decent levels of vitamin D to make sure that you reduce those problems. Neurological health, it supports brain health and cognitive function, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest the links between the vitamin D levels and also mood disorders like depression. Metabolic health, as I mentioned a little bit earlier as well, and just how important this is. Insulin regulation, it may influence the insulin secretion and sensitivity, which will impact this whole problem. And it's a huge problem in the world today, this obesity and type 2 diabetes. And generally that goes back to a metabolic disorder, where vitamin D can also, making sure that you've got that, your insulin sensitivity will be good, and you will get a sufficient response out of it to prevent those problems. So in summary, let's just look at it. The health benefits. Beyond bone health, adequate vitamin D levels are also associated with a number of other things like the immune support, where it enhances our resistance to infections, including respiratory infections, and also can play a role in reducing illnesses like influenza and COVID-19. And I can tell you, over the whole COVID period and through to now, one of the things with keeping my immunity high, I haven't had really much more than a sore throat over this, and this for a couple of years. I haven't used an antibiotic in years. Autoimmune disease prevention, a really big thing that's happened over the last couple of years. There's been an explosion as far as autoimmune diseases are concerned. It also has a metabolic syndrome component to it, but there is a lower risk of multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis, and type 1 diabetes, which are all autoimmune diseases, if you make sure that your vitamin D levels are right and your immunity is strong. Cancer prevention, the potential protective effect against things like colorectal cancer, breast cancer, prostatic cancer is evident when you keep your levels up. And again, cancer prevention is very often related to good immunity and making sure that your immunity is well switched on to prevent or reduce the risk of developing cancer. Mood regulation and mental health is a link between the lower incidence of depression and improved mood with optimum levels of vitamin D. Cardiovascular health as well, it may help prevent hypertension, heart failure, and ischemic heart disease. And I'll mention when I speak a little bit later about the cardiovascular disease, the link between issues that you could have with vitamin D relating to arteriosclerosis, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Metabolic health as well. There's a possible role we've mentioned this, in regulating insulin secretion and the sensitivity of insulin, which impacts the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. So again, make sure your levels of vitamin D are good, and generally you'll have a good response as far as your insulin is concerned to pull down the carb and sugar levels that you need. So vitamin deficiency, it's a widespread problem across the world. And, a lot of people don't realize that they are, in actual fact, deficient in vitamin D. It's a big problem, obviously, in, again, in countries going further north where they don't get as much sun, and they have limited exposure to the sun. Also, lifestyle. We spend a lot of time in offices. We spend a lot of time not getting out into the sun, and it's really important, even for convalescents. It's an incredibly important thing. Get out into the sun, get your vitamin D. And obviously, the use of sunscreen is also a bit of an issue. Inadequate dietary intake is another area. We often don't eat nutrient-dense or nutrient-rich foods, and that can also cause a problem. You can also have malabsorption disorders like celiac disease, Crohn's disease, and those are also related very often to gut health, where you're not absorbing your food correctly and you're absorbing the wrong things into your system, causing the inflammation and other things where you're not absorbing the nutrients that you need. There are certain medications that also affect vitamin D metabolism, things like steroids, prednisone, the anticonvulsants as well, some weight loss drugs. A very important one, cholesterol-lowering medications like the statins, and then also some what we call high-ceiling diuretics. Some of the thiazide diuretics can also do it. Some of the symptoms we've spoken about in children, you get rickets, bone deformities and growth retardation. In adults, it's the osteomalacia, bone and pain, muscle weakness, and then general symptoms of not having enough vitamin D, like fatigue, bone pain, muscle aches. And you can very often find, if you have bone pain, just by making sure your vitamin D levels are corrected, the bone pain often goes away immediately. Who are the risk groups for vitamin D deficiency? Obviously, older adults. As we get older, we're not producing as much as we were producing as youngsters. When you have a darker skin pigmentation, also people with limited sun exposure, and our lifestyles are leading us to that. Something also very important to note is with obesity and having a lot of fat around, vitamin D is actually sequestrated into the adipose tissue. So very often people who are obese will have to take more vitamin D in order to maintain and get their levels up again. Breastfed infants without vitamin D supplementation also run the risk of vitamin D deficiency. So the big question, how much vitamin D should we be taking? There are lots of views, and I've read a couple of interesting studies over the last few months about it. And, the official figures range between the 600 international units we're talking about for adults to 2,000 units daily. And then others say you don't need as much. And the general government consensus is you don't need as much. But studies have actually, showed that it is in actual fact necessary to have somewhat higher levels. Studies also show varied things related, obviously, to your environment that you're in, where your vitamin D levels are sitting at the moment, where you are sitting in the world in terms of the sun, your diet, age, and of course, sunscreen, all impact how much vitamin D you should be taking at the end of the day. And if you're ever in doubt, as I say, get tested. It's not, I think, that difficult a test to have, and I think they've already even started making tests that you can do at home as well, or you can get a doctor to do pull bloods and actually give you a test result as well to give you some idea where you're sitting. The levels in the body should normally be between around about 40 to 70 nanograms per liter and milliliter, and you can also understand that a small amount as 20 nanograms per milliliter is enough to prevent rickets. So that's the lower end of the scale, and the 70 nanograms generally the upper end of the scale. You can use up to like 5,000, 10,000 units or more on a daily basis. And this question that came up earlier in the week about the doses of 50,000 international units, and consider that. Yeah, doctors can use 50,000 international units a week with a single tablet that is available. It's available on prescription, but it's also generally for specific indications like weak bones and teeth, which is called rickets normally, or osteomalacia. That's problems with how bones are formed in adults and so on, and they have a huge lack of it. They will use this. And then also another condition, this hypoparathyroidism, which is what it would generally be used for. So it has a specific indication as well. Can you take too much vitamin D? I know it's always very often been said, no, you can't, but you must remember vitamin D, like AD, E, and K are all lipid-soluble vitamins. And the one issue, or most common, I guess, is if you are taking excessive calcium for very long periods of time, you can get this hypercalcemia, which is a situation which can cause problems with your arteries and so on, and the hardening of the arteries. Kidney stones also are a possibility. And then you get this funny thing, which is a reverse of, you get the demineralization with very, very high levels over a long time of vitamin D, and can lead to bone loss. Some of the other symptoms of high vitamin D levels, or excess, is dehydration, confusion, arrhythmias, and calcification of soft tissue. And that's where the issue comes in with our arteries and so on, because it's as a soft tissue. So where does vitamin K2 come in? Vitamin K2 actually works with vitamin D, and it's also a fat-soluble vitamin, but can play a critical role in cardiovascular and bone healing and interaction with vitamin D. How it works is vitamin D basically is responsible for the absorption from the intestine. K2 then directs the calcium to the bones and teeth, and it inhibits and stops that deposition of the vitamin D in the soft tissue, or the calcium in the soft tissue. So you end up then that you taking K2 with D will prevent any of that problem of the deposition in your arteries. Also, as far as bone health is concerned, the combined effect of your vitamin D ensures sufficient calcium levels, while vitamin K2 ensures that the calcium is deposited in the bones in the right place where you actually need it and want it.
Bob, we've got 8 minutes.
Okay, I'll move it quickly. Cardiovascular health, I'm almost done. Preventing arterial calcification, and that's the thing I was talking about, is to prevent arteriosclerosis. Where does it come from? Cheese, eggs, egg yolks, and liver. And then it's also in a number of the fermented foods and vegetables, and obviously from supplements. So looking at the Neolife quickly, chelated CalMag. Sorry. Chelated CalMag is which contains your vitamin D3, 170 IUs, calcium 100 milligrams, magnesium 50 milligrams, osteoporosis, and that's what it's important for, to help develop strong, healthy bones. The vitamin A and D that we have is the vitamin D2, 400 IUs, and again, that's also important, but for bones, teeth, osteoporosis, and the absorption of calcium and phosphorus. Pro Vitality, aside from it being a powerful antioxidant, important for heart health, immune function, health, and brain function, or healthy brain function, and then also for your skin, nails, and hair. It also has D3 and is very good as far as prevention of osteoporosis is concerned. Formula 4 contains also vitamin D3. It has magnesium and phosphorus, and again, with its huge range of vitamins and minerals, the TNN, it has this whole chain of life concept where it is important for overall health and our nutrition. And then vegan D, the last thing, 320 IUs of D3 and D2. And that's also for osteoporosis, strong bones, muscle function, and our immune system. It's important. I'm going to leave out, I think, the high blood pressure. I think as I said, it will be great to do a full session on that. And we'll go through the whole thing of the main causes of high blood pressure, deal with the different products that we have as well. For instance, the lipotropic, which is really important and can also counter this issue related to calcification in the arteries. And then just some tips, and we'll finish there. Always take vitamin D with a fatty meal. Ensure you get out and get your daily sunshine, preferably as the sun rises. Manage your stress and get your exercise. And very importantly, eat a healthy blood sugar balancing diet to prevent problems. Consider using vitamin K2. Ensure that you are properly hydrated, and maintain a healthy weight with lean muscle mass, because remember the impact that obesity has in reducing your vitamin D available. So watch sunscreen, compensate for age, check chronic meds that may be used, like statins. Are you eating a good blood sugar balancing diet? Gallbladder also has an impact, because digestion of fats are important, using what comes from the gallbladder. And do you have gut health issues like inflammatory bowel disorders? And then, of course, the immune diseases which can cause problems there. And that's it. Thank you very much. Sorry to rush the last bit, but
No, Bob, it's fine. Thank you so, so much. Um, and thank goodness we have recorded this because there's lots of food for thought, no pun intended. So where the amount of the Neolife vitamin D is concerned, it is a very low D. Would you recommend it for children, Bob?
talking about the vegan D.
Yes.
Yeah. Look, the levels are low enough that you could, in actual fact, use it for that. There are, I suppose, a number of other products, but yes, the levels are, and again, the age of the child, maybe just be careful and not going to too lower age. And we're talking, 4 or 5 years of age and upwards. So yeah.
Okay, so I've been looking through my files and we'll find it eventually a similar thing to what you've just done. Thank you. Where Liz Geertz put together a combination of our products, which if you use that combo will give you a very nice higher level of
Yeah.
vitamin D to supplement your sun exposure and your diet. I just want to ask you, we've got 3 minutes. Castor oil. Is it what they call it? Not castor oil?
Cod liver
Fish
oil.
oil. What's it called?
Cod liver oil.
Cod liver oil. Um, sorry, I'm getting the two mixed up. But cod liver oil is in the vitamin A and D.
Yep.
So that is also interesting for people who are looking for that as an extra in their diets. And then I'm rushing through here before not allowing questions. I'm sorry. I have a very strong suspicion that the Pro Vitality has been launched in America already with a new formulation coming out of the South African problem with that's the hard capsule. The hard vitamin has now been put into a soft. And in America, they have added vitamin K to it. So by next weekend, we'll know, and I would put my head in a block if it's not going to be launched here next week as well. Can we hold over questions then for keep on the group, keep them coming, and we will follow up in 2 weeks' time if there are any other issues to do with the vitamin D. I just wanted to also add in to remind you all to let your customers know about this fantastic reformulation, or not reformulation, they've reduced the number of tablets in the botanical balance to make it more affordable. So you can send that out on your status, Instagram, etc., social media, and just let people know that it's now a 60-pack, not a 90-pack, and has therefore become far more affordable on a month-to-month basis. So we've got 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. Meryl, Hermine, have you got anything you want to just put in? Rob, do you want to say something?
Yeah, still that question of vitamin D1. Maybe we must carry on with that discussion as well.
Yeah, D1, as I say, it comes from it being pretty much a misnomer, and that's why I say, D1, you won't really find it listed. It refers to a group of compounds at the end of the day, and if you look at as I say, the calciferol, which is what that 50,000 units, tablet is that's produced. They don't specifically give. They say it's equivalent to 50,000 units of D2, but it's synthetic and it's a combination of compounds related to vitamin D at the end of the day.
And maybe that's where we should end. That's what makes our D so fantastic, is that it is a vegan one and it is not synthetic. It's being made from those fungi, mushrooms and things. And took a long time for the company to get it because they were determined to find a natural source. So without much more ado, thank you, Bob. Thanks, Hermine. Thanks, Meryl. Onwards and upwards, and we will see you again in 2 weeks' time. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Thanks, Meryl. Thanks, Hermine.